remarkable professionals who will help us get a very clear idea on financing. We have Ms. Aniela, who is more debt finance focused, and Mr. Simon, who is focused on equity financing, specifically venture capital. All right. So let's first start off with an understanding of where debt financing is at the moment, especially as it relates to your aspects, Ms. Aniela.
Okay, thank you for the invitation and good afternoon. I would like to briefly explain Guatemala experience. I work in Alterna. Alterna is a social impact platform from Guatemala. We work to close gaps that limit entrepreneur access to capital. We support them by by building financial statements, cash flows. We support them, I already said, by providing continuous support and follow-up. In parallel, our ecosystem is on this way to being ready for venture capital. But you know that equity requires a level of maturity that a lot of early stage business are still building. That's why what has worked for us is flexible debt. For example, we work with two investment funds, Acceso and Devela. They provide loans linked to sales cycles and seasonality to the entrepreneurs. This is much more realistic for entrepreneurs for tourism, agriculture, or a small business that face variable revenues. We also believe that capital alone is not enough. That's why we run acceleration programs. We realize that entrepreneurs need continuous support to achieve their goals. For example, sometimes they think that they are ready to receive capital or investment, but the truth is that with the right support, they will be truly prepared. Regarding to the academy, academy should form professionals with critical thinking, with innovation capacities, the ability to turn ideas into viable business models. But at least in Guatemala, universities are still in the process of assuming this role. That represents an opportunity for platforms as ours, for public sector, for private sector. It is an opportunity and a gap too, no? And finally, I would like to mention some lessons, some learnings. Take it step by steps. Maybe start with flexible debt is more realistic for entrepreneurs. Invest in acceleration and investment ready programs. I already said they need the support. And strong partnerships could open the door to equity in the future. And last but not least, we strongly believe that BELIS has opportunity to design a models that fit this context. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Aniela. So let's pass it over to Mr. Simon. Tell us more on the venture capital side. How does this act as a cushion to the challenges that Ms. Aniela provided to us?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just use a minute or two kind of to explain what the Inter-American Development Bank does, the IDB. So we have three main funding mechanisms in which we provide support. The first major one is one that most people will be familiar with. We support governments in terms of debt. The second is as it pertains to private sector, that's IDB Invest, that provides support to private sector institutions. But we tend to say corporations because they tend to provide financing to larger corporations, debt or equity. And then I'm with IDB Lab. IDB Lab specifically focuses on a gap that we realized was missing a few decades ago. We particularly focus on funding for innovation. So we call ourselves the innovation laboratory for the IDB. So we provide non-reimbursable funding grants. We provide reimbursable funding, debt or equity, and the broad range is from about 250,000 US to up to 5 million US. Um, First debt versus equity. As it pertains to venture capital is extremely critical in any ecosystem. And we've realized that ecosystems, or let's move it to countries that perform the best, that have high levels of productivity, tend to have relatively robust innovation ecosystems. Those are ecosystems that help to nurture small, nurture ideas to actual on paper, then to actual steps to start the business through a process where the business can grow and scale and employ and add value back to the country. So venture capital is effectively a part of private equity that focuses primarily on early stage companies. Now, how does this help Belize and countries? So I'm Jamaican. If you didn't hear the accent, so countries like us, small island development states. I don't know why they call Belize that. It's not an island, but let's go with it. States, right? So,
I think the description we used was small open economy.
small open economies. So it's important for us because for most of the countries in the Caribbean, if you realize, from an independence perspective, tend to be less than 100 years old, relatively young democracy. Now, for many decades, investment and innovation really was done in traditional sectors. So if you go across all of the Caribbean, excluding the ones that focus primarily on oil and gas, you'll see that the largest industries are in finance, so banking, traditional banking, they're in real estate, or they're in manufacturing, distribution, if the cost of electricity is relatively low. So the amount of investment that we've traditionally put into innovation and tech and productivity, so not just productive sectors, but focusing on productivity, has been relatively low. So at the IDB lab, what we try to do is to engender increased investments in that by helping to support organizations such as Alterna. We work indirectly through organizations such as Alterna and Accesso as well. But we also support businesses directly, MSMEs that are looking to have impact. Now, based on where Belize is and my understanding, and I'm still learning, about the country itself, is that you believe that you're at a crossroads. Now, you can see the potential in Belize. Belize sits between, how I put it, Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Very well suited to take advantage of that unique, not just geographic position, but economic position and relationship that you already have with Central America. You already have it in the north with Mexico, and you definitely have it with the Caribbean as well. What pushing more capital into venture capital does is, one, it allows new types of innovations to come up. Why isn't there Uber from Belize? Why do we think there can't be a large fintech, coming from Belize as well? The ideas are here. So what we're trying to do is connect smart capital, patient capital, with ideas that we know are already here.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Miss Aniela mentioned something very important. She touched on the areas of academia. And here in Belize, we have the Institute of Banking and Finance. And the focus has been primarily on anti-money laundering. And thereafter, we have cybersecurity, a word that has been a buzzword for the entirety of this session. And we have fraud risk management, but also that main focus on risk management. Mr. Simon, capital doesn't flow where there's no trust. And in terms of regulatory compliance, tell us how important that is as it relates to the attraction as in terms of venture capital.
It's excellent that the governor of the central bank was just here, because that's exactly what he spoke on about financial stability. Think about it this way: if you were to want to invest as a Belizean in country Y, you've never been to country Y, you have capital to invest, you are more likely to invest in that company if you in that country or companies in that country if you believe that one, you can get your capital to actually get to the country and to the company that you need, that the company within the country can grow. If something goes wrong, you can use legal systems to get back your capital, and eventually, hopefully, when you're ready to exit, you can exit safely and take your capital at value back to your country. So financial stability is important because in the country, when we're inside our own countries, we understand the system better. It's kind of a home bias. You're much more comfortable investing in Belize. I'm much more comfortable investing in Jamaica. So how I see it is getting to the point where overseas investors are more comfortable investing in the country, and they will become more comfortable once they can trust the system. And business really moves at the speed of trust. All right. So I said that.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Simon. Ms. Aniela, can you walk us through how you believe Belize is uniquely positioned between Guatemala in terms of our partnership opportunities?
I didn't expect it. Okay, maybe I could mention Wakami. Wakami is a small company in Guatemala. They work with rural women, artisans. We empower them to transfer from artisans to entrepreneurs. They craft handmade bracelets, and with training, with access to market, with mentorship, they are now selling their products all over the world. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to support their, in so the IDB, we covered 26 countries, across the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. So we've certainly have business in Guatemala, Honduras, as well. And how do I put this? So everyone has used a pack of cards before, right? Everyone has used a pack of cards. If you try to fold a single card, what happens? Folds. Pretty easy, right? I wish I had just brought the pack of cards. I couldn't find any to buy. Sorry. So if you put 5 of those cards together and you bend it, it's a little harder, but it still bends. If you use the entire pack and try to bend it, what do you think will happen? It's going to be very hard to bend. So how I see the Caribbean is I see the Caribbean as a continent in itself. We are stronger together as a region. We are, if you use the same example, harder to bend when we're all together. So I think so I definitely believe in regional focus, particularly because venture capital, so Belize population wise is very small. Jamaica is very well, a little larger, but also very small. Trinidad, etc. Individually, we're all small. What small businesses need to scale outside of Belize City, outside of San Pedro, outside of Belize, Jamaica, etc., is scale. When you are trying to grow these types of businesses within country, it becomes much harder to scale and you reach a natural limit. So you have to start looking abroad. If we can, you know, build more regional scale, or opportunities to scale, then that gets better. I mentioned exit as well. So any equity investor that goes into an investment will want to understand how they're going to exit. So if you're an entrepreneur, that's one of the first questions that an investor or that we would ask. How are we going to exit this investment in the future. The thing is, even within the Caribbean, the Jamaica Stock Exchange is one of the most active markets, not just within the Caribbean, but within the entire Latin American space. The Jamaican Stock Exchange was actually the top performing stock exchange in the world for about 3 years, a few years ago, prior to COVID. So the level of activity there is very strong. This can help to create a means not just to support stock exchanges across the region, create avenues to exit, but to create a means for companies from Belize that want to have that capital exit to be able to exit or list in Jamaica, as well. As it pertains to Guatemala, just to touch back on your original question, I think so I've been having this thought. Belize, looking on the map, Belize sits between Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. It's very tied into those three. I was going to call Mexico a region, but it's $1.9 trillion, so it's its own region. Those three regions. If, for example, we could think about how Belize can position itself as a single incorporation for venture capital investors that allows venture capital funds, fund managers access to both to Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. And Belize specifically in the Caribbean is unique to that because you alone would have that type of relationship with all three players in the market.
All right. We have one final question. As I mentioned, we'll keep it short and sweet. And this question is primarily for Mr. Simon. Mention you've been interacting with 26 countries, but I want you to be biased to Belize for this question.
Mm.
So, as it relates to the general setup, we have the entrepreneurs, the investors, policymakers, and different institutions. Where would you say a focus can be placed in terms of opportunities and areas for persons in Belize to place them in a better position for capital?
That's a very good question, and it's a question that we've asked of the region. If you look at reports that speak to the Caribbean and Latin America, a lot of the times, if you look into the methodology, the date there is no much there's not much data for the Caribbean there. Particularly small open economies such as Belize. We're about to close a study this year, IDB Lab, looking to study the venture capital ecosystem to answer that question. And hopefully next year we can include Belize in that. But what I'd mention, without having, I'm biased towards research first, but I'll speak anecdotally based on my professional experience, is that I think it's important to set the foundation for venture capital funds to want to come to the country and to incorporate and grow in the country. An important way that other countries have done that is to create the regulatory environment, not not a regulation that speaks broadly to MSMEs, not just regulation that speaks broadly, regulation that speaks to venture capital and startups specifically, that speaks to the safe notes that Alterna will help investors to understand, that speaks to how the fund is incorporated and what it can do, and whether there are tax benefits or not. I'll stay away from the tax part, right? So setting that environment and then advertising that, look, we are open for business. This summit is a way of doing that. There are a lot of international investors here, and we're not just open for business, but you can come and register tomorrow, and here's everything. Here's all the ways that you can benefit from that. And we are unique from every other country because, and I'm just, speaking of the mind here, that we're unique from every other country because in our regulations, for example, we have relationships with Mexico, we have relationships with Costa Rica, with Guatemala, Honduras, etc., that allows companies to incorporate through us, but scale into those countries relatively easier rather than going to them directly. And of course, Belize already has CARICOM. So you can already incorporate in Belize and then scale into CARICOM relatively easy, right? As I say relatively there, you understand why, right? So I think having that regulatory framework is important. We spoke about universities. I think, and this is cliche, but it's very important. Building a culture of entrepreneurship is also important. Sometimes in universities, we tend to, we tend to inadvertently or subconsciously strip entrepreneurship from them and creativity because we want them to be good workers to go into the industries and to build industries, etc. But we should also teach them how to own. We should be teaching students how to form actively companies from university and scale, test within their university of Belize, etc., and encourage that type of culture within that space. I think it's important. Another important part of academia is research. A very important part, at least within the academic space. The relative cost, of doing research is relatively lower because, of course, the mechanisms are set up to do that. But we also need to, outside of anecdotal evidence, understand what entrepreneurs in Belize want, what the consumers want, where in the system we are, who the support organizations are, what the deficits are, what is needed to fill those roles, and how can academia and universities and all stakeholders help to fill those roles. That's a part of the study that we're doing in 5 countries in the Caribbean now, which should be released within 6 to 8 weeks. Those 5 countries are Jamaica, the Bahamas, Barbados, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. So hopefully next year we operate expand
All right. Thanks. Any final words, Miss Aniela?
it. For me, what I'd be remiss to not encourage all the organizations and entrepreneurs here. If you are seeking funding, either debt or equity, you are familiar with the business, um, women led. So we also support the gender gaps as well. So that's a part of it. But businesses that are innovation and tech driven and are impact driven, then certainly reach out to us. I guess I'll just give my email, simonj at iadb.org, or you can reach out to the organizers. I hear there's an app, so there's an address book in the app. You can always message me through that as well. We're the investment part of IDB Lab. We're looking to build out the relationship that we have with the ecosystem in Belize. So I encourage you. This is the third stage of this. I encourage you to continue to have summits like this and invite investors to come to Belize to see it for themselves. And Pedro is amazing. I think I'll have to come back personally at some point. But thank you.
All right. Thanks.